Let's use the whole.
Okay, yeah, then since that was a mistake on my part, we can alter, it would be 3 out of 5. So who got 3 out of 5 or more?
What is it?
I remember.
Have a recount because I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I will now. The winner. Okay, so I will have you guys pick out your prizes at the end. Keep your sticky notes and remember how much questions you got right, so we can get started with the program. So, a little about the center. Ronald W. Walters Leadership and Public Policy Center, established by Howard University in 2012.
So I need to know the
research, political observation and discussion, publication, and leadership development for Howard students interested in U.S. national and foreign policy.
Okay.
The center preserves the legacy of former department chair, an internationally renowned scholar, an expert on political issues affecting the Black diaspora. Dr. Elsie Stein is the founding director of the Ronald W. Walters Leadership Public Policy Center at Howard. Dr. Scott is a woman with many accomplishments. She earned her Bachelor's of Arts from Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, her Master's from University of Iowa, and her PhD from Atlanta University, now Clark Atlanta University, all in political science. Dr. Scott has taught political science, urban studies, and criminal justice at several universities, including Howard, Rutgers, Central Florida, Federal City College, now UDC, and North Carolina Central University. She also has served boards on nonprofit and professional organizations, including the National Council of Negro Women, NCOBS, and currently serves as the chair of the advisory committee for the Baldry Center for Philanthropy at Southern University and as secretary of the board of National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. Prior to coming to Howard, she has served as the president and chief executive officer at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and now she diligently takes on the role as a director of the center and as my boss. So please help me in welcoming her to the stage.
Thank you, Jakinia. It has been a pleasure working with her this year, and give her a round of applause for all of her. I found out a piece of trivia about Jakinia after she came to work for me, and she came to there and said, "You must have a copy of Ron Walters' book on white nationalism." I said, "Girl, where you came from? How do you know about that?" And so I found out that she had done some research on Ron Walters when she found out she was going to be working with us, and she received a scholarship. So I'm glad to have somebody who's enthusiastic about the history. And we wish her well. She's graduating this year. Okay, so we're going to try to move this along because we're a few minutes late, and one of our scholars has a plane to catch, and so we want to make sure that he gets that plane because that's part of his future development after he leaves Howard University. But I want to, before we bring Dr. Carr and the panel up, I want to just recognize the Kemler family. In March 2019, the Ron Walters Center launched the inaugural Edgar Kemler Lecture on the campus of Howard University. The lecture was made possible by a gift from Jane and Paula Kemler in honor of Jane's father, Edgar Kemler. Okay, who was Edgar Kemler? We'll have that on the trivia next year. He was an instructor of government here at Howard University from 1957 until his death in 1960. Prior to joining the faculty at Howard, he had taught political science at Harvard, where he earned a master's degree in public administration. He had also attended Johns Hopkins and graduated Phi Beta Kappa. And he's the author of several books. And so we are just happy that when they were too young, Jane and his brother Tom were too young to know their father. Because I think one was 3 years old when their father passed. And they did research and they found their father had taught here at Howard. They wanted to do something in memory of him. And so they reached out to development office here and they introduced them to me. And I have not let them go since. But we thank them because we started a guest lecture program at first. And during the pandemic, we could not do that. And so I asked them if they would sponsor some students, interns, and they agreed to that. And I would just like to announce that one of the two students that served as an intern during the pandemic, I just found out that she's gotten some award. Like I did right now. But anyway, she's now at Northwestern University working on a JD and MBA. And she came to Washington and met with me. I'm grateful for what you all did about her education during the pandemic. And so then last year we decided to do something different and we decided to sponsor this competition. And one of our awardees from last year is in the audience, yeah. Wesley. No, that's I'm sorry, Ellison. I'm sorry, Ellison. Is here, and he's a graduating senior in political science, and he also happens to be from Chicago. We'll talk about Chicago. So this time I would like for one of the most dynamic professors at Howard University to come and lead the panel, and that's Dr. Greg Carr. Professor of Afro Studies here, and he also finds the time to teach at the law school. So he has a PhD and a JD, and he's one of the persons that students seek out when they need somebody to talk to, when they want to talk about activism. And he used to teach the freshman orientation class, and I think this is your last class since graduating this year.
I think so. After they took it from her, she knows it's 2 black guys. Yes, thank you.
But thank you, Dr. Carr.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Very good, very good. I want to thank my dear friend, Elsie Scott, who the inaugural director of the Ronald Walker Center, who has done remarkable work. Can we give her a round of applause? Every place she has been before she came here in that role, I'm sure they want you back there, not least of which is the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. We can need you on their wall. We absolutely in these days. And also, of course, to the person I'm going to ask permission from to continue, presiding elder, of course, the life partner of Ron Walters, a force unto herself, thinker, activist, the force behind the Ron Walters Center, and that's, of course, our dear sister, Patricia Walters. Is that what you? Do we keep on? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. You gotta ask permission to open the way. This panel, of course, is entitled, oh yeah. You know I got no CD, so I copy this about my time. That's good. Here it is. Thank you. I'm going to introduce our 2 discussants today and talk about their work. The title, of course, American Political Climate Through the Voices of Youth. This is the only reason we are here. Apologize for us being about 600 seconds late. The current secretary of the zoning institution is on campus. Dr. Lonnie Bunch, is over in the minor hall talking about current circumstances. says he doesn't know whether he's going to make it through the current administration. They certainly come to him, but while he couldn't lock it, he did say that it is our job to fight. In the spirit of our Walters, we have no choice but to fight. That is what we are doing. Especially on a day like today, April the 9th, this is Paul Roleson's birthday, and my math serves me correctly. So we got to say something about Paul Roleson and passing. But most importantly, we are here for Orogomi Aka. Here we go. Let me say it right. I'm moving too fast. I got the Orogomi like the right, Bomi for short, but I like the Orogomi. You got to tell me what your name is. And Arakiri. I got it right.
No.
Say it again.
Akarakiri.
Arakiri.
Akarakiri.
Correct. They misspelled it. Akarakir.
Kiri.
Kiri. So it's Akarakiri?
Yes, sir.
It's tonal, huh? How would you say it?
Akarakiri.
Yoruba? Igbo?
Yoruba.
That's what I thought with the O in front. I figured it was. A senior political science major, management communications minor. She grew up in London, in the United Kingdom, and now permanently resides in the DC metro area. I love how you said permanently, as if you're not going to be all over the world. But now, I guess you could say permanently. Bomi's a first generation Nigerian, Yoruba, you say that, and aspires to have a career in foreign policy towards sub-Saharan Africa. We definitely need you involved right now. In fall 2024, Bomi studied abroad in Botswana. He tells us about denim and diamonds, which is certainly what Elon Musk is after right these days with those tariffs, to increase her firsthand exposure to the continent. And in fall 2025, you're going to begin your master's program in international affairs. So please join us here on the stage. Bomi Akarakiri. Joining Bomi will be Caleb Brantley, senior from Chicago, Illinois, majoring in political science and minoring in criminology, with an interest in theological studies, legal advocacy, and political office. His career, your career, Caleb, your objective is to practice an eclectic and holistic ministry that focuses on representing marginalized communities, that addresses complex social and cultural issues, and that bridges political divides. Please join us, Brother Caleb Brantley. A plane to catch, right? You gotta get on a plane in a minute. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You gotta make that move. So we're gonna get right underway. I want to thank the Kemler family again. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for those resources. The times that we're in, they're gonna become even more important. Some other people got to take the tax money, give them every week, and spend it on something else, but you all do many here. So it's very important, and thank you again for that. These two scholars that we see, of course, were the winners of this year's Kemler Project Writing Competition, which engaged. Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially in the age of artificial intelligence, when some people are being encouraged to think that AI can write their papers, it's no small thing to acknowledge original work that you've done yourselves. And so that's a very important moment. This year's topics touched on the 2024 presidential election, political parties, and Supreme Court cases. Winners were awarded an expense-paid trip to the annual meeting of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists in New Orleans, where they presented their papers. And I should pause here to say that INCOAST, of course, as you heard, Dr. Scott, a prominent figure in INCOAST for many years, one of the junior proteges and students of women like Jewel Presage. Of course, Ron Walters, one of the founders of the field of Black politics at INCOAST, and a brother who recently made transition. We just had his memorial this past Saturday at the law school at Dunbar Chapel. And that's Russell L. Adams, the longtime chair of Black Studies here at Howard, one of the co-founders as well of INCOAST. Very important. I'm glad y'all got a chance to hang out with those elders, because that really is the genealogy that you're in. Let's look at both of the essays that you wrote. One of your essay answering the question that was raised. Discuss at least two factors that may have caused Kamala Harris's 2024 presidential defeat. And Caleb, your essay, which answered the question, in what ways could the Supreme Court decision in the City of Grants pass versus Johnson affect Black people? And how could Black communities help combat similar issues in the future? My first question is, of the proper topics, why did you pick the 2 topics that you picked? Oh, you got 3 of these, okay? Please.
Thank you, Dr. Carr, and thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to Mrs. Walters for your presence. We really appreciate it, and the Kemler family, of course. I decided to choose my topic because I was, as you know, studying abroad in Botswana in the fall, so I wasn't here for the latter half of the electoral campaigns, but I was watching from afar. So I felt like it was really important to assess the reasons why people who voted didn't vote for Harris, because in my opinion, and from what we've seen as well, she ran such a strong campaign. So my essay focused rather on 1,001 reasons as to why the people didn't vote. I wanted to look at the reasons why the people that voted didn't vote for Harris. So I looked at, or I explored the phenomenon of the glass cliff, which we'll get into later, I'm sure. I also looked at the impact that the Biden administration had on the defeat of Harris's campaign. So Biden's age coming into role, his controversial or unpopular policies regarding immigration and the border. That also impacted Harris's campaign in a negative way. And finally, I looked at Harris's campaign and reasons why I felt like she didn't have much of a pull with white women voters or rural voters. I felt like she could have done more to attract other demographics that typically weren't going to vote for her. Because I feel like she did a phenomenal job with mobilizing Black communities, and I felt like she could have done more to attract voters that typically weren't going to vote for her.
Thank you. Okay, why did you pick?
Thank you for that question. And first, let me say thank you to Ms. Walters, the Kemlers, Dr. Scott, everyone for being here. This is a wonderful experience. I chose this topic for a few reasons. The first being its resonance with me. As Dr. Carr mentioned, I am a man of faith. I had to sit with a verse in scripture from Proverbs 29, chapter 29, verse 9, where it said, "The righteous seek justice for the poor, but the wicked have no concern." And I thought about that in the context of this particular question with regards to the Supreme Court and its recent ruling. The next reason was for more practical matters. I do want to become an attorney one day, and for my lawyers or future lawyers in the audience, you know how strenuous it can be to read cases and brief them. It's a tedious process, but it's worthwhile, and I was glad that I was able to have that experience to look at and sit with the case to examine the potential effects that it has on marginalized communities, specifically Black people. And then lastly, the goal of this paper was to place homelessness against the backdrop of economic instability, punitive criminalization, among other reasons. The next was to dispel common misconceptions of why people are homeless. And the last was just to provide some solutions from either a grassroots level to the federal level and international level that looks holistically at the issues and find ways to remedy them.
Thank you, Caleb. We're going to, now that we've gotten a sense of why you all chose the topic you chose and your interest, let's dig into the paper a little bit. Some of the, obviously you won the competition, and some of the comments that commenters made we'll share with everyone here and for those who are watching on the streaming. On your paper, some of the comments include the fact that your introduction did a great job in introducing the topic, giving clear data on her loss and why you thought she lost. Arguments were well developed, pieces were organized, paper well researched, presented a balanced argument covering historical context and psychological theories. One of the things you introduced, as you alluded to, was this concept of the glass cliff. You might want us to look at this and kind of factor in your analysis as you kind of read through and try to make sense of why the vice president did it.
Yeah, so the glass cliff phenomenon basically states that minorities are typically placed in positions of leadership during crisis periods. And there's a saying that goes, think manager, think male, think crisis, think female. And I felt like that was really interesting because as you analyze the historical context of civil rights movements and just any mobilized activism event, women, especially Black women, are the backbones of that. But when it comes to positions of leadership and how that translates into organizational structures, women don't get the respect they should deserve when it comes to being seen as a leader. And that's because characteristics of leadership are restricted. And again, because of this phenomenon of the glass cliff, when you associate desired characteristics of what it means to be a leader, often Black women aren't paired up with that. And I felt like that negatively hindered the success of VP Harris's campaign because even though she had the credentials, the leadership qualities, people still doubted her ability to run the country. And that's why a lot of people are regretting their votes today.
I know that's right. I know that's right. But Kelly, before I come to you, you don't mind a quick follow-up question, because as a Congo African, raised in the UK and then here, certainly the places you're from and have lived are no strangers to female leadership, whether you prime ministers in the UK or women leading on the continent of Africa, heads of state, even the AU, which I had a leader in South Africa. Just, and this is beyond the scope of your paper, but as you were writing and thinking about this, obviously observing from without, any informal sense of how this election was turning out, how that was perceived on the continent, because you're over there at that time, are they looking like people crazy? I mean, what the hell, why is this even close? I'm just wondering.
Yeah. I would say it was a bit mixed. Botswana is a female-dominated country, but when it comes to how that translates into organizational structures, men are still hold majority of leadership positions. So a lot of people did doubt Harris's capacity to lead in the US. And again, I'm Nigerian, so when I went to Nigeria in December, I was able to visit a lot of political buildings and attend meetings and stuff. And the first thing I noticed wasn't about my race, it was about my gender. I said, wow, I'm the only woman here. So I think being in those male-dominated spaces, the discourse was very consistent to what was in the US. And it was typically amongst women that were the ones saying, how can everyone be this blind? There's a really qualified candidate here, and people are still doubting her ability to lead.
It's really worldwide. That's good. Thank you. Then we'll bring you in. You know, when the grants passed, decision came down, there was a lot of conversation. This was Oregon. Yeah, a lot of conversation in legal communities about that. A lot of obviously people who are very vulnerable being assaulted that way in a typically quote unquote liberal state. In your paper, you said that 4 out of 10 Black people experience homelessness. We don't typically think of it that way in terms of the racial face of homelessness. How do you think the ruling in Grants Pass versus Johnson will affect cities like the District of Columbia, or your hometown, Chicago, or if y'all saw the New York Times day before yesterday, a long article on those who are in unhoused shelters who are actually full-time workers, including they profiled a sister who actually works as a homeless advocate, and she herself is in a shelter and making between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. A lot of these people living because they can't afford the rent in New York City. How do you think this ruling will affect cities like DC or Chicago or New York, where there's a high percentage of Black homes?
Thank you for that question. And it's a very important question, specifically related to violence in Chicago. I believe this ruling will only exacerbate the problem. The problem that exists here today is here, and it can be here for a long time. This data comes from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Urban Planning. It says that Black Chicagoans who spend 30% of their check on rent are almost considered a rent burden. Statewide, that's about for family income. Black families make only around $27,000. The next up is Latino families. They make around $40,000 compared to their white counterparts, which is almost nearly around $89,000. Now that's consistent with the numbers of the nation, around $80,000 for white families compared to Black families, which is around $53,000. So we see how this problem is already interconnected. both locally, statewide, and federally. And we see how this ruling can only, like I said, it only exacerbates the problem even further. There's this thing with urban renewal projects. Proponents of this view would say that it helps to revitalize certain areas, but there are some common misconceptions with that. First, it relocates or even just vacates people who are already existing there. It raises the prices of loans and insurance for existing people as well. And so it becomes harder to become a homeowner and even harder to rent nowadays. So specifically, and like I said, in the city of Chicago, it's already present. I can only see that this current ruling would exacerbate the problem even further.
Thank you. We're going to be 4 months into the current president's administration, and there's already talk of who will be the Democratic pick for 2028. You've seen the governor of California jump out there. Cory Booker took a day and an hour, launched himself into the conversation. Our own Walter's chair, Stacey Abrams, of course, these names are being floated. Consider everything you touched on in your paper and what we could charitably call the recent controversies in the current administration. Hate to put you on the hot seat, but what would you like to see in a candidate for 2028?
That's a $1 million question. I feel like what I would like to see is a fresh face, and I mean that in terms of age, and also in terms of someone being less removed from the DC politics scene. That doesn't mean not being experienced, but I think what people are really craving is a return to dignified politics. And when I've been doing my research and stuff, I see that people reference the McCain-Obama campaign and how that was a very respectable campaign because both parties played a clean fight. And I was privileged enough to intern at the McCain Institute in Washington, DC. So learning more about John McCain and his work to, one, address racism that was going on between his supporters and them being against Obama, and also just his work in politics. I don't really understand why people say that. So I would definitely like to see a younger, fresh-faced candidate. And I feel like with the Democratic Party, as you referenced, if they want to leverage the political climate that we're in now, I think it's important that they start grooming someone from as early as they can, rather than waiting last minute and having, say, another Black woman have to pull out a successful campaign and turn around in 104 days. Yeah.
Okay, well, let me follow with that very quickly. Obviously, we got midterms between them. And certainly with the movement, people protesting out the streets, we here this weekend. Fresh face, it's interesting. We call some of them out on Marks at the Valley weekend here in the district. The former vice president, word on the street is she's going to go ahead and bring back to be governor of California. In your estimation, smart move, considering that a lot of governors end up being presidents, people like Bill Clinton, George W. Bush. I mean, if you were on her team advising her, you tell her maybe hang out in the California State House in Sacramento for 4 years, maybe try to get on that.
I think it wouldn't be detrimental to her if VP Harris, former VP Harris, were to transition into a governor role, because with the sentiment, especially with the actions of this new administration, I think people are starting to appreciate the value she brought to politics, and maybe and hopefully that can translate into vote. So I think.
Is it a face expression? Well, she's only in. I don't know. I mean, what you just said.
It's more fresh than. So I think any age that's going down or up is a fresh face.
No. Understood. Caleb, what do you think the court's findings in City Grants vs. Johnson reveals about the country's views on homelessness? So I'm thinking now in particular of your hometown, about Mayor Johnson, some of the anti-immigrant sentiment that's been stoked over the last election cycle. Now, even in your hometown, there are people saying we need services You're not addressing these services, how you giving shelter to these folks who just got here. I'm just wondering, the politics of homelessness, how do you think this case maybe opens up a conversation about that, or even does?
Well, first, let me say I'm not a big fan of Mayor Johnson, but that's a different question.
No, it's not. This is the question I was asking you, brother.
Yeah, no, I think the court's ruling, it doesn't reveal anything new, I would say, but it just further perpetuates what we've already seen today. Now, the court's reasoning in this particular case, the majority decision was by Justice Neil Gorsuch, and he ruled that that local governments can enforce ordinance. So, if you're sleeping in public areas, parks, encampments, you can be criminalized for that. And he does make the distinction that so long as there aren't more, if there are more shelter beds, then they can be housed. But another problem that he mentions is that he makes distinguishable between status and conduct. He draws on reasoning from an earlier case in Powell versus Texas, which makes that distinction. In that particular instance, it was with regards to being an alcoholic and public intoxication. So the status, being an alcoholic, the conduct, public intoxication. The issue here is that you're talking about, and this comes up in the dissent from Justice Sonia Sotomayor, where it's hard to make that distinction between being homeless and then having the ability to sleep, right? It baffles me that you even want to criminalize sleeping, but
Which
it's
he
hard.
says.
Which he says exactly, and so it's hard to make that distinction because you're thereby connecting homelessness with something as vital as sleep. So I think it already, and then also, my father, he always says, it doesn't make money, it doesn't make any sense. And homelessness, as sad as it is profitable. It creates a perpetual cycle. So if you are homeless and you do find yourself face to face with the criminal legal system, you're incurring all types of fees, which you have no job, you can't pay. So you're cycled into the criminal legal system. Once you get out, you need to find a job. That's already hard as it is. You can't find a job, you can't get a house or a loan or a mortgage. Can't do that, you can't get food. So what are your only other options? If you want a good night's rest, you're probably going to commit more crimes. And we don't talk enough about the link between the criminal legal system and poverty and homelessness. So I think these are already conversations that we're having, but they're being ignored. And so I think this ruling, once again, it doesn't reveal anything new, but it already, in a sense, codifies the existing precedent that we're already used to with regards to how we treat homeless individuals.
I'll ask you a quick follow-up, and then I'm gonna open it up to everybody, so, be thinking about anything we want to ask and engage with our scholars. Caleb, just as news came down this week, Trump administration wanting to repurpose millions of dollars to ICE to create these camps, basically to take people and put them in. This case that you just described, the kind of criminalization of being, for lack of a better term, just being can be a crime. And thinking about the fact that the court has chosen to be very, very laser focused on procedure in order to perhaps avoid the substantive issues. We see that, of course, with this recent decision. Well, we don't know about sending somebody out of the country, but the standing, you run the wrong venue, file it in Texas, trying to avoid the inevitable conflict. This case made it to the Supreme Court, but it was a local ordinance. So any concerns about state, local, and federal government in terms of these kind of shifting authorities that could criminalize a person for simply being? Today it could be someone with a green card who gets shipped out of the country, and it's like, we ain't gotta bring them back, you can't bring them back. Or it could be somebody at the local level who has been criminalized just for sleeping, just for being in the world. Any concern about the precarity of people's just ability to be?
That's a good question. That's a deep question, actually.
You better address it, brother.
That's a really good question. No, I think, and It's funny, we talked about this actually in freshman seminar about the course legal jurisprudence and how, as you mentioned, it is focused on procedure rather than, serving a just outcome. And I think with regards to this case, there are major concerns because now this provides a legal framework for the federal government and state governments and local governments to enforce different types of laws and ordinances against houseless individuals or just people in general, for, as you mentioned, for just being, right? So now that we find it hard to make that distinction between status and conduct, I think that's going to be a major problem because if you look at the Eighth Amendment, it mentions excessive bail and cruel and unusual punishment. Usually those follow a criminal conviction. Now, if you haven't been convicted of a crime yet, then that doesn't apply. But the problem here is that you're attaching status to conduct, and in this case, the conduct is simply sleeping, right? When you have nowhere else to go. So what do we do about that? I would say that it does cause concern for pause, and I don't know. We have a couple more years with this current Supreme Court, so yeah.
It's a good answer. In fact, I didn't share, I shared some of the comments on your papers. Okay, look, I'll do the same, and then let's open it up. Some of the comments from the judges were a good amount of context about the topic, well-developed arguments, sound reasoning. The introduction does a great job of grabbing attention. Thesis is clear. The documentary's goal of exploring how criminalizing homelessness affects Black communities by organized arguments backed with solid data like stats and legal examples. So I just wanted to share that. Let's get some conversation here from Roman K. Anybody have any questions, comments? Ma'am? Absolutely, of course, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Very good. Yes, please, go ahead. Introduce yourself. You know, I have people watching from around the country or the world.
Can I stand up?
Yeah, she's gonna bring you the microphone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Ellis Murchison. I am a senior honors political science and African American studies major from Chicago, Illinois. Southside born and raised. And I was asked to ask a question, and I'm gonna put my own little Ellison spin on it too, right? So currently the Trump administration, this is to both of you actually. Currently the Trump administration is making big budget cuts and firing workers from federal agencies, including the Department of Housing and Urban Development. How do you two think communities should mobilize the future potential impact of these policies? And also, when it comes to viewing the politicians in the public sphere on any level, but particularly the national level, how do you believe that we should learn or at least react to their action or however you deem it?
Sure. Well, thank you, Ellison. It's nice to see a brother from the South Side. I think, at least on my part, it requires a couple of things, but I would say the most viable is a grassroots level approach. And we can look throughout history and see how this has worked. We saw this with the Black Panther Party survival programs where they focused on housing assistance and the right to tenants. We saw this with, I might butcher the name, but the new community grants in Georgia in the late 60s and 70s where they focused on the exact same thing, but took it even further and looked and sought to fight for access and control to land to secure affordable housing. We saw this with the Poor People's Campaign in the 60s. And I think if we can emulate this, I would advise for mutual aid networks where we can pull together resources within our own communities, resources and expertise. Such thing as mental health clinics. We don't talk enough about mental health in regards to homelessness. Legal clinics, the renovation of vacant buildings, so empty hospitals. If we want to take it even further, partnerships with public contractors to renovate these old and refurbish these buildings. And if we want to rely on the government, we can advocate for a housing first policy. And what this essentially is providing housing without preconditions such as sobriety or employment to offer personalized, individualized, and voluntary assistance in the in the sphere of mental health, legal help, and employment. So I think there are a variety of ways that we can address this problem. And also, I might mention that it only costs taxpayers $10,000 to support housing for a single person experiencing homelessness. If I could just field this question, does anyone know how much it costs to criminalize a single person in the United States?
In Maryland, it's 60,000 a year.
60,000?
Yeah, a year.
I know nationwide. That's I did not know that. Thank you for letting me know that. Nationwide, it's around $30,000 to criminalize a single person. So there's already that $20,000 difference. Knowing where your tax dollars go. So I think addressing that is very important.
Okay. I will answer the latter half of the question first before doubling back on the first half. I think with respect to leaders and how we should view them, I think it's important to first of all acknowledge that leaders should be placed on a different accountability level than regular people. And I think when we start there, it weeds out a lot of non-viable candidates from even attempting to pursue power, because leadership comes with great power comes great responsibilities. And I think once we acknowledge that, then we're able to really groom and develop capable leaders who in their personal and public lives exemplify what it means to be or what it means to hold a particular power and office. And I think that with the first half of your question, similar to what Caleb said, it does start at the grassroots level, but going further than that, I think inter-community organization is very important. The reason I say this is because it's one thing to discuss within yourselves resources and solutions, but then if you're not sharing this with other people, your impact is limited. And I think especially with the life of Dr. Walters, he penetrated PWI and HBCU spaces to share his knowledge. And I feel like that was powerful because then you're educating people who may not have received education about certain issues had you not have been in that space. So going back to communities, I think with, let's say the Black communities, if we are able to penetrate white spaces and then bridge their resources and money and all these things that they have that we have less of, and we come with our knowledge, which is also powerful, that can really create great social change.
Yes,
We don't have
one
one more question.
okay, very good. Thank you.
We're gonna hear from Mrs. Walker.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Of course.
All right, how y'all doing? Thank you for your time and this riveting conversation. My name is Khalil Daniels. I'm a graduating senior criminology major, legal comms minor from the west side of Atlanta, Georgia. I just want to pick it back up. West side, the best side. I just want to pick up where y'all left off about, connecting different communities. And we know right now social media is king. Media in general is always going to be a great avenue to, transfer information. So with that being said, with respect to the last election, how do you feel media had an impact on Harris losing the election? And secondly, how do you feel we as youth, as colored youth, can use media to push the message that we want to push, unity, as well as, just for different messages, as well as education, prison reform, different things like that?
Okay, that's a really good question. I would say that social media in some ways amplified certain, I don't want to say negative qualities, but perceived negative qualities of Harris. So two things came to my mind. First was the fact that she used to be a prosecutor, and amongst the Black community, you think prosecutor, and you think back to the inequalities between data on Black criminalization versus non-Black criminalization. And I think when those things start to spread, a lot of misinformation starts to spread along with it. Second thing that came to mind was her appeal to urban voters and also youth voters. I think it helped in some ways by targeting people that don't necessarily follow the news or read up on politics, but it also, I think, to some people, presented her to be, I don't know this particular word for it, so I'll give an example, like her use of celebrity endorsements, and also another, like TikTok video I saw of her campaign was using the pop the balloon trending like YouTube videos to highlight people should vote. I think when you take that and you mirror it with a serious topic like voting, elections, politics, some people could take that as she's not taking politics seriously. So I think it helps and hinders her in certain parts.
That's for Dr. Scott, as you're coming up, I want to just very quickly, y'all can do 30 seconds each on this because again, it's being recorded. People are going to watch this for next year's competition. Any advice for those who will be writing in the next round of competitors?
Yeah, I say the biggest advice I can give is just choose something that resonates with you, and find your why as to why you want to write on this particular topic. From this year's discussion, there were a variety of them, so I think just choosing one that resonates with you and how you can make an impact within that research is going to be very, very important.
I would say be sure to plan your essay before you write it. I always do very detailed, extensive plans before I write an essay, and that helps me to think out my essay logically and make sure that it makes sense.
Thank you so much, Omi Akarakiri and Kaylee Franklin, both of you for your scholarship, for your engagement. Futures Q, Dr. Scott, please.
You all have been excellent.
Yes.
And sorry we don't have more time, but we told people we're gonna try to end at 1, so some people have classes to run to, but we can't leave here without hearing from Mrs. Walters. We would not have this Walters Center here at Howard if it had not been for her, because they had talked about creating one, but they weren't doing anything. They passed the legislation to the Board of Trustees, but nothing was happening until Mrs. Walters got on her mission and said, "You promised a center in my husband's name." And then she was gone further than that. After we created the center, she stayed in touch with me, made sure that I have the resources, at least some of the resources that I need. And then she took, because you don't know Mrs. Walters, she's an art collector. And she took her art collection and donated $2 million worth of art to Howard University. So we want to close the program today. I know we have to give the prizes, but we want to close the program today with a few words from Mrs. Walters, Mrs. Patricia Walters. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't want to go up on the stage. I'm a very informal person. First thing I want to do is to really thank the Kemler family. It's been just a wonderful experience in my life to have known them throughout the years and for what they have done for the center, the Walters Center. So I want to personally thank each and every one of you for that and for honoring your father, who was a great man in his own right. I want to thank Dr. Scott for being the founding director and for working really hard to put bones on the Walters Center and doing it sometimes without some of the monies that were promised by Howard University. I should put that in. So we had to struggle to find monies on our own. But that's Howard for you. We all love Howard University. It's the only like it is. And I would like to thank Greg Carr, who Ron admired this man. I can't tell you how much he admired you, and you know that. And it was a relationship that was perfect, really.
That's our leader.
Yes. And the 2 young students, I was very impressed with your paper and with your one further your education. So thank you very much. And you are wonderful examples, I think, of what the Walters name means. And that once you have knowledge about him, you can take that and go forward. I just want to very briefly acknowledge, piggyback on your question, because I think that was an excellent question that you put forth. The media is totally controlled by the right wing. So they have all of the television stations, all of the radio stations, and Fox is powerful. And they shaped Colin. They really shaped her, and they shaped her message. And that hurt her. And the prosecuting business, but also the media is a powerful instrument in our country now. And they shaped that, and they shaped what she would be. She was much more qualified than Trump, but we all know that. So that was not even relevant. So I want to make that point. My final two remarks will be about Ron Walters. Ronnie, the reason why I think that he was such a wonderful man, he was able to see the future. Because if you read his book on white nationalism, he wrote that book way before, in the early 2000s, before we were inundated with the Trump racism. Trump is, I hope the end, but we really don't know. It could be the beginning, who knows? Ron saw that coming in his book, White Nationalism and Black Interests. He saw the possibility of having a black president in his book, Black Presidential Politics. And he wrote that book in the late 80s, long before that he was even involved in Jesse Jackson's campaign in 84. And the other thing that Ron's quality was, although he had wonderful relationships with all the presidents, Carter, Clinton, Obama, he was able to go out on the street and see a homeless person and stop and take time to engage that homeless person as a human being and ask them, is there anything that I can do to help you right now? He said, let me take you to lunch. It's the busy man that travels all over the globe. He would take the homeless person sometimes, if he had time, to get something to eat, gave them money after that, and engaged them, and asked them the question, if you could have anything right now, what would you want? And he got interesting answers when he came home and shared these stories with me from the homeless. They're not all drug addicts. This man had psychiatric issues. And he would say, I would like to be able to find somebody to help me with my personality that swings all over the place, for example. And so if Ronnie had the time, he would try and find somebody that would provide a service for him for free. He had contacts all over the place. It doesn't have to be political science. And finally, I would say that Ron was a teacher of some of the greatest Congressional Black Caucus leaders that we've ever had. He taught Elijah Cummings. Elijah turned to him to say, Dr. Walters, do you think I have the ability to run for office? Ron laughed at him. He said, get out there, man, and do your thing. He said, you might not win the first time around, but don't give it up. He taught Mike Epstein. He taught some of the brightest young young people that went on to higher levels than we can know of. But he was a common man, and he was never full of himself. He was a very gracious man. And I can't tell you how many people. I remember when Ron made his transition, and this is my final point. When Ron made his transition, I was getting calls from all over the country. And so my sister was answering the phone, or relatives. Well, she ran back into the family room and she said, Patsy, that's my nickname. She says, somebody's from the office of Nelson Mandela is on the phone. Do you think it's a joke? I said, no. I said, Nelson loved Ron. I said, give me the phone. Nelson Mandela personally called me. And he said, Mrs. Walters, he said, I'm so sorry for your loss.
He said, but even more important than that, it's a tremendous loss for you. But we won't see the likes of another Dr. Ronald W. Walters in the next 50 years, in my humble opinion. He was that special. He said, I read his book, South Africa and the Bomb, when I was in prison. They got it into me. And he was right on the mark that they didn't have nuclear weapon technology when the white scholars were in denial about the possibility of that. And so that's all I can say about mine. Just Google him. I want the young people, in particular at Howard University, to become much more knowledgeable about Dr. Walters, because he was here for 25 years and he loved this place. He had to leave and go to University of Maryland, not because he wanted to, but because he was not appreciated by the president of the university. And I speak truth to power too, just like Ron. And he did not appreciate him and gave him a hard way. And Ron said, you know, it's okay not to be appreciated at the prestigious white university sometimes, but not to be appreciated at my own university by the president. I just need to leave. And University of Maryland welcomed him with open arms. And so on that note, I'll stop. Because I could talk about Ron Walters all day. Hi, Joe.
Thank you, Mrs. Walters. And let me thank all of you for being here today. Those of you who were in the room, those of you who watched on YouTube. And I want to thank my good buddy, Dr. Grady Clark, for answering the call when we need him.
See, Ron Walters, that's all we should all do, is follow right your legion.
And thank you for the young people who've written the papers,
Yes.
the ones who won, the ones who may be watching, and you didn't win. If you're a junior, you can apply again next year. And those of you who are sitting out here today, if you're a junior, then start thinking about what you heard from these young people and think about applying for next year. We have lunch outside. Thank you so much for coming, and you can engage anybody who's here in any discussion as we eat lunch. Thank you very much. Oh, I forgot, I have to mention my staff.
Yes.
Thanks to Wanda McFarland for all the work she does at the center. And Virginia, I've already mentioned you, and Abigail, who comes with volunteers, no pay. Come and help us out. Now, what about the award?
Yes. If you guys got 3 or more right, I will give you guys the award. You can come up here and then you guys can get food. Food is out in the hallway. Help yourselves. Thank you so much for coming.
I got here before they started. Yeah.